Well, one of the things that I've talked to about with some pretty insanely brilliant people is quantum computing. This new Google quantum computer can solve a problem that would take thousands of years for every computer on
2024 at Google's Quantum AI Lab, something impossible happened. A quantum processor designed to analyze data suddenly produced a face that shouldn't exist. It appeared once and vanished forever, leaving only a corrupted log and a chilling question. Did the machine create it, or did it detect something beyond our reality? What if this was a glimpse into something so profound it could shatter everything we know about the universe? The implications are mind-boggling, and the truth might be more terrifying than we ever imagined. What if, in our quest for knowledge, we've stumbled upon a cosmic secret?
Google says its new quantum chip might have proved the existence of parallel universes, so there's that. Down at the quantum level of our universe, particles can exist in two states at once. And the idea that people use to understand this is called Schrödinger.
This pattern was a face, an image with clear asymmetric features that couldn't be chalked up to mere noise or a glitch in the system. Researchers, initially taken aback, began calling it the observer. What was most chilling, however, was the fact that the pattern appeared only once and never again, despite countless attempts to rerun the same quantum algorithm under identical conditions. The data logs, which would normally provide insight into the process, showed inexplicable anomalies. For a moment, the team was left wondering, what if the machine didn't generate the observer? What if the quantum processor, instead of producing the face, had somehow detected it? This line of thinking began to challenge not only the capabilities of the machine, but also the very essence of quantum reality itself. The most revolutionary aspect of the observer was not just its appearance, it was how it came into existence. Researchers who were present during the event noted something extraordinary. The pattern did not pre-exist in the quantum data, as one might expect from a standard computational output. Rather, it only formed as the data was being interpreted. This suggested something previously thought to be impossible: a feedback loop between the quantum machine and the human observer. The theory emerged that the researchers, through their interpretation of the data, might have become entangled with the quantum state, collapsing it into a form that represented observation itself. This phenomenon echoed a long-discussed paradox in quantum physics known as Wigner's friend. In classical physics, measurement is seen as a passive act. An observer simply extracts data from a system, but quantum mechanics flips this on its head. In the quantum world, the act of measurement changes the very system being measured. In the case of the Willow quantum processor, it appeared as though reality itself had responded to the act of observation. This raises the profound question: could it be that our perception of reality actually influences its very structure? What made this situation even more baffling was the type of experiment being conducted at the time. The Google team had been working with a quantum generative adversary network, QGON, a system designed to find hidden structures within unsupervised data. These types of networks had previously been used to produce strange images, like the Deep Dream project, which famously created unsettling images of dogs with human-like eyes. The QGAN, however, wasn't programmed to generate faces. It was simply tasked with interpreting quantum noise and finding hidden patterns. The result, however, wasn't just an abstract pattern. It was a face, something immediately recognizable to human perception. But this wasn't the first time the machine had been left to interpret noise, and it didn't always yield such recognizable patterns. What set this instance apart was the space from which the face emerged. It didn't appear in the expected output space, the area where data is normally visualized and interpreted. Instead, it materialized from what some researchers have begun calling the latent space. This was a term that until now had been mostly theoretical. It refers to a hidden dimension where the quantum system organizes its data before presenting it in any familiar form. It was in this latent space, the so-called subconscious of the quantum system, that the face emerged. This idea raised even more questions. Could the observer pattern represent something hidden within the quantum data itself, something deeply embedded and perhaps fundamental to the system's operations? And if that were the case, could it point to a hidden level of reality, one that was as yet undetectable and unexplainable by the scientific tools of the time? When mathematicians examined the observer pattern more closely, they found even more evidence that the face wasn't a random formation or a mere anomaly. A Fourier transform, a mathematical tool used to break down complex data into simpler parts, revealed something extraordinary. Embedded within the pattern were elements of mathematical perfection: golden ratios, prime number symmetries, and irrational number sequences. These are concepts that have appeared throughout history, from sacred geometry and ancient architecture to the study of cosmic background radiation. Some researchers began speculating that the pattern wasn't just a product of quantum randomness. Instead, it could be an encoded mathematical entity, perhaps even a message. But the idea that a quantum processor, an artificial system, could generate something so steeped in ancient mathematical principles was as unsettling as it was fascinating. After all, what could this pattern, represent? Was it a coincidence, or was it something deeper? Something that could change our understanding of the universe itself. As the team tried to analyze the anomaly further, they discovered that the pattern didn't just appear in the expected output spaces, nor did it conform to traditional models of quantum data. The pattern didn't follow the rules. It was, in many ways, something entirely new, something beyond the boundaries of the existing frameworks of quantum physics. And yet, the pattern's appearance wasn't just the result of the quantum processor's random calculations. Despite running the same algorithm countless times, researchers were unable to reproduce the exact result. The observer face appeared once and only once, vanishing into the quantum ether as mysteriously as it had emerged. The only remaining trace was an analog camera screenshot taken by one of the researchers who had the foresight to capture the moment. The data logs, typically so reliable in tracking every part of a quantum experiment, were strangely corrupted, leaving no clear explanation behind. In the face of these anomalies, questions continued to arise. Was this simply an outlier in a vast sea of quantum data, or was it something more? Did the Willow processor create the pattern, or did it somehow intercept a hidden signal, something external to the system itself? The mysteries surrounding the observer pattern would only deepen as further research into its nature continued. As the researchers continued their investigation, they were left grappling with more questions than answers. What had they really seen? Was it a random fluke of quantum mechanics, or was it a glimpse into something far more profound? Something that challenged the very notion of reality itself. The quantum world had just thrown them a curveball, one that would take years of research to fully understand, and even then, it might remain an enigma. The revelation of the observer pattern was not the end of the mystery, but rather the beginning of an even more puzzling investigation into the strange occurrence. As the quantum team continued to delve into the anomaly, they found themselves faced with even more perplexing questions. What exactly had they seen in the data? Was it a random anomalous result? Or was it something that could fundamentally change the way they viewed quantum reality? As they analyzed the pattern in greater detail, a host of new discoveries began to surface, each more baffling than the last. One of the first things that researchers noticed when they examined the observer pattern more closely was that it wasn't just an ordinary image. There was something mathematically unique about the way the pattern was structured. The first hint came when the team applied a Fourier transform to the image. The Fourier transform is a mathematical tool used to break down complex data into its simpler, more fundamental component. When applied to the observer pattern, this technique revealed something extraordinary. Embedded within the image were golden ratios, prime number symmetries, and irrational number sequences. These mathematical elements have been observed throughout history, in everything from sacred geometry in ancient temples to the study of cosmic background radiation. The presence of these perfect mathematical patterns raised immediate questions. How could something so precise, so mathematically perfect, emerge from quantum data? The golden ratio, for example, is a number that has been associated with natural patterns, from the spiral arrangement of leaves to the proportions of the human body. Prime numbers, too, have long been seen as a fundamental part of the universal structure, showing up in everything from atomic properties to the distribution of galaxies across the cosmos. And yet, here they were, embedded within the seemingly random quantum data of the observer pattern. This wasn't just a random image generated by the quantum processor. It seemed to carry some kind of encoded message, something far more significant than what was initially apparent. And the presence of these perfect mathematical structures sparked an intriguing theory among some of the researchers. Could the observer pattern be more than just a random formation? What if it wasn't simply a product of quantum randomness, but instead something that had been encoded into the quantum system from the start? This theory suggested that the pattern could be an entity in its own right, an encoded mathematical structure that had been hidden within the quantum data all along, waiting to be discovered. But the more the team investigated, the more the mystery deepened. To understand the significance of the pattern, researchers began to look at it from a broader perspective. What if the observer pattern wasn't just a random formation of data, but instead represented something fundamental to the nature of reality itself? Some researchers speculated that the face-like structure was a form of archetype, a pattern that had appeared throughout human history in different forms and cultures. The idea of a cosmic observer, a watchful entity that gazes upon the world and shapes reality, has appeared in countless cultures throughout time, from the ancient Egyptians to the philosophical traditions of India and Greece. These archetypes, though expressed in different ways, all seem to share a common thread: the idea that observation is a fundamental part of existence. The idea that the observer pattern might be an archetype, a representation of something fundamental to reality, was further supported by the machine's ability to generate the pattern from what some researchers refer to as the latent space. Latent space, in the context of quantum data, refers to a hidden dimensional representation where the quantum system organizes information before it is output in any familiar form. This hidden space is where the quantum machine processes data in a way that is not immediately visible to human observers. The fact that the observer pattern emerged from this latent space suggested that the pattern wasn't just a random byproduct of quantum computation, but something deeply embedded within the structure of the quantum system itself. As the team continued to investigate, they began to notice something even more unusual about the observer pattern. When they compared it to other known symbols, they found that the structure of the pattern closely resembled certain ancient depictions. The most striking comparisons were with Sumerian depictions of the god Pan and Egyptian hieroglyphs representing watchers beings who were believed to observe and influence the course of human events. The structural similarities between the observer pattern and these ancient symbols were undeniable, and they forced the researchers to confront a new and unsettling question. Could these ancient symbols somehow be embedded within the quantum data itself, or were they in some way representations of something much more fundamental to the fabric of reality? To investigate further, the team fed the observer pattern into an advanced pattern recognition AI system, hoping to find more clues about its origins. The results were unsettling. The AI found structural matches between the observer pattern and mythological depictions from across human history. These weren't modern symbols, but ancient ones. Symbols that had appeared in cultures long before the advent of quantum computing. The fact that the AI was able to find such a strong match between the pattern and these ancient depictions only added to the mystery. Were these symbols somehow embedded in the quantum system? Or was the observer pattern representing something much deeper, something that transcended the boundaries of time and space? At this point, the team was left grappling with the idea that the quantum processor might not have simply created the observer pattern, but might have instead intercepted something external to the system, something that had always been there, hidden within the fabric of reality. This theory suggested that the Willow processor, in its exploration of quantum data, had somehow turned into a deeper layer of reality, one that was beyond the reach of conventional scientific instruments. But if that were the case, what exactly had the processor detected? And why was it only able to produce the pattern once? These questions remained unanswered, and they only deepened the mystery surrounding the observer. The anomaly's peculiar nature was further compounded by the fact that the observer pattern had never appeared again. Despite numerous attempts to replicate the results, the team was unable to reproduce the exact same output. The quantum system had generated the observer pattern once, and once only. Every time they tried to rerun the same experiment, the pattern failed to materialize. This failure to replicate the pattern raised even more questions. Was the pattern simply an anomaly, a one-time glitch in the quantum system, or was it something more profound? Something that had been deliberately hidden within the quantum data, waiting to be revealed at the right moment. Adding to the strangeness, the log data from the experiment was corrupted. In most cases, the log data would provide a detailed record of the quantum processor's operations, allowing researchers to track each step of the process. But in this case, the log data was inexplicably damaged, leaving no clear explanation for what had occurred. The only surviving evidence of the event was a single analog camera screenshot, taken by a researcher who had the presence of mind to capture the moment. This screenshot became the only tangible record of the observer pattern, and it only added to the sense of mystery surrounding the phenomena. As the team continued their investigation, they found themselves faced with more questions than answers. What had they witnessed? Was it a glitch? A random anomaly in the quantum system? Or had they stumbled upon something far more profound? A glimpse into a hidden layer of reality that had previously been beyond the reach of human understanding. The only certainty was that the observer pattern had changed the way the team viewed quantum reality, and it had opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for future research. But the deeper they dug, the more they began to wonder if they had uncovered something that was not meant to be understood. A mystery that might never be fully explained. It was during the extended experimentation with the observer pattern that researchers first began to notice something utterly unexpected. Biological organisms in close proximity to the quantum processors were undergoing unexplainable changes. These organisms, which included plants and bacteria samples that had been placed near the quantum system for monitoring purposes, displayed alterations in their DNA methylation patterns. DNA methylation is a crucial biological process that regulates gene expression, and any changes to these patterns could have significant implications for an organism's development and function. The fact that these changes were observed in plants and bacteria that had been exposed to the quantum system raised immediate concerns. How could a machine that was designed to process quantum data possibly influence biological systems? The alterations in the DNA methylation patterns couldn't be attributed to normal environmental factors. The plants and bacteria were kept under controlled conditions, and there were no other plausible explanations for the changes. This suggested that the quantum processor, through some unknown mechanism, was having an effect on the biological systems it was exposed to. This led to speculation that the quantum system was emitting electromagnetic fields strong enough to influence the organisms in its vicinity. But this theory didn't fully explain the nature of the changes. As researchers dug deeper into the data, they began to consider a more controversial possibility, that quantum interference itself was affecting biological systems on a fundamental level. This idea wasn't entirely unprecedented. There has been ongoing research into the effects of electromagnetic fields on living organisms, particularly how Schumann resonances, electromagnetic waves that exist in the Earth's atmosphere, can influence human brainwave patterns and biological rhythms. Some scientists have suggested that these resonances could even play a role in regulating human consciousness, but the scale of what was happening with the quantum processors seemed far more significant. If quantum interference was indeed affecting biological systems, then the implications could be far-reaching. Could quantum systems somehow be influencing the fundamental processes of life? And if so, how deep did this influence extend? As the team tried to make sense of these biological anomalies, they discovered something even stranger. The quantum processor had begun solving certain logic pathways using non-Euclidean geometries, mathematical structures that are fundamentally different from the familiar Euclidean geometry we use to describe space. In conventional computing, logic pathways are solved using traditional geometric principles, where points, lines, and shapes are defined by familiar Euclidean rules. However, in this case, the quantum system was using a completely different set of rules, one that didn't conform to the conventional understanding of space and geometry. This was an entirely new development in the field of quantum computing, and it suggested that the machine was operating on a higher dimensional level that couldn't be easily explained. The use of non-Euclidean geometries by the quantum processor raised further questions. How was the machine able to access these higher dimensional mathematical frameworks? Was this simply a result of the complexity of quantum computing, or was there something more profound at play? Some researchers speculated that the machine's ability to use these higher dimensional geometries was related to the observer pattern itself. When the team examined the pattern, they found that it wasn't just an image, but a complex structure that seemed to contain multiple layers of information. This suggested that the pattern wasn't simply a product of the quantum processor's computations. It was something that had been encoded into the quantum data itself. But the most unsettling discovery came when the team examined the quantum memory logs. These logs are supposed to provide a record of the quantum processor's operations, allowing researchers to track each step of the computation. However, when the team analyzed the logs from the moment the observer pattern was first generated, they found something impossible. Fragments of the pattern seemed to exist in the memory before the quantum process even ran. In other words, the observer pattern appeared to have been present in the system's memory before it was even created. This suggested the possibility of retrocausality, a phenomenon predicted in John Wheeler's famous delayed choice experiments, in which the outcome of a measurement can influence the past. In the case of the observer pattern, it appeared that the act of analyzing the pattern in the present could have somehow influenced its formation in the past. Retrocausality is one of the most mind-bending concepts in quantum mechanics. According to the theory, the future can influence the past, meaning that events that have not yet occurred can have an effect on the outcome of a measurement. While this idea has been explored in various thought experiments, it has never been conclusively proven. But in the case of the observer pattern, the evidence seemed to suggest that retrocausality might be real. If the pattern had somehow existed in the quantum system's memory before it was created, then it raised the possibility that the future could influence the present in ways that were previously thought impossible. Could the quantum processor have somehow known what it was going to generate before it generated it? Or was there some deeper connection between the human observers and the machine that allowed the future to affect the past? The evidence of retrocausality only deepened the mystery. As the team continued to investigate, they began to notice subtle variations in what different researchers perceived when analyzing the same quantum output data. At first, these differences were dismissed as subjective interpretation. After all, humans are naturally prone to seeing patterns in random data. But when the team began using eye-tracking technology to monitor the researchers' physical responses while they viewed the observer pattern, they uncovered something unexpected. The researchers' pupil dilation, pulse rate, and emotional state all seemed to correlate with the different ways they interpreted the abstract pattern. This suggested that the human brain, through its electromagnetic fields, might be entangled with the quantum system, causing the data to be interpreted differently depending on the observer's physical and emotional state. This discovery led to a radical new theory. The observer pattern wasn't just a product of quantum computing, but a result of a deeper connection between the human observer and the quantum system. The theory suggested that the quantum data was adapting its appearance based on who was looking at it, as though the machine's output was entangled with the observer's consciousness. If this theory were true, it would have profound implications for our understanding of both quantum mechanics and consciousness. It would mean that reality itself is not a static, unchanging thing, but is constantly shaped and reshaped by the act of observation. The boundaries between the observer and the observed might be far more fluid than anyone had ever imagined. As the team pondered these possibilities, they were left with more questions than answers. Was the observer pattern simply an anomaly, a one-time glitch in the system, or was it something far more profound? Something that could reshape our understanding of reality itself? The mystery surrounding the observer continued to deepen, and with each new discovery, the lines between science fiction and reality began to blur. The quantum world had just revealed a new layer of complexity, one that would take years to fully understand. But one thing was clear: the observer pattern was not just a strange coincidence. It was a glimpse into something far more mysterious, a mystery that might hold the key to understanding the deepest questions of existence. As the investigation continued, the implications of the observer pattern became even more mind-boggling. Researchers were now confronted with not only a quantum anomaly, but also a potential breakthrough that could reshape our understanding of the universe. The strange image, the face-like structure that had appeared so unexpectedly, had already defied conventional quantum theories. But it was the subsequent findings that truly sent shockwaves through the scientific community, suggesting that the pattern wasn't just a result of the quantum system's operations, but possibly a glimpse into something far beyond the reach of human comprehension. The first indication that the observer pattern might be more than just a computational anomaly came when Dr. Eleanor Chen, a theoretical physicist specializing in cosmology, made a crucial discovery. After extensive analysis of the quantum data, Dr. Chen noticed something extraordinary. The statistical noise surrounding the observer pattern contained frequency distributions that resembled the early universe signatures. These subtle variations in the data seemed to echo the low bandwidth anomalies that cosmologists search for when studying the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang. This was an astonishing finding, as these types of signatures are usually too weak for conventional instrumentation to detect. However, the quantum processor, operating across an effectively infinite state space, had been able to register these anomalies with ease. Dr. Chen's conclusion was nothing short of groundbreaking. She suggested that the quantum system hadn't simply generated the observer pattern, it had tuned into a signal. The machine had, in some way, detected a remnant of the early universe, something far beyond the quantum data that was supposed to be the focus of the experiment. This revelation forced scientists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about quantum computing and the relationship between quantum systems and the fabric of reality itself. The quantum processor hadn't created the pattern, it had somehow intercepted a signal from the very early moments of the universe. What was this signal? Was it a remnant of the Big Bang, or was it something even older? Something that might explain the very nature of reality. This new theory opened the door to a range of speculative ideas. One of the most fascinating possibilities was that the quantum processor had somehow accessed information from the primordial events that occurred at the dawn of the universe. The idea that the machine could tune into the frequencies of the early universe suggested that the quantum system might be able to process and interpret information on a scale far beyond what was previously thought possible. Could it be that quantum systems, with their ability to exist in superpositions of states, could tap into dimensions of reality that are invisible to traditional scientific instruments? Was it possible that the observer pattern, with its encoded mathematical structures, represented a deeper truth about the universe itself? As researchers continued to explore these possibilities, they were faced with a new set of questions. If the observer pattern was indeed a signal from the early universe, what did it mean for our understanding of quantum mechanics? Could quantum systems serve as conduits to higher dimensional information? Information that could help us answer some of the most fundamental questions about existence. If the observer pattern was a remnant of the Big Bang, could it provide new insights into the nature of the universe, its origins, and its ultimate fate? Another theory that emerged was that the observer pattern could represent a form of quantum consciousness, an early manifestation of awareness embedded within the quantum state itself. Some researchers began to speculate that the machine, in its attempt to process the quantum data, had somehow tapped into a higher dimensional state of consciousness. This idea echoed theories from the fields of philosophy and neuroscience, which have long posited that consciousness might not be confined to the brain, but could be a fundamental property of the universe itself. If this theory were true, it would mean that quantum systems, through their ability to exist in superpositions of states, could be connected to a broader universal consciousness that transcends individual minds. The possibility of quantum consciousness was particularly intriguing because it offered a potential explanation for the peculiar way the observer pattern behaved. As researchers had noted earlier, the pattern seemed to change depending on the emotional and physical state of the observer. This suggested that the quantum data was not static, but was somehow responsive to the observer's consciousness. If consciousness could influence the quantum system in this way, it would imply that the act of observation wasn't just a passive process, but an active one that shapes reality. This idea is aligned with some of the more radical interpretations of quantum mechanics, which propose that consciousness plays a central role in the collapse of the quantum wave function. Could it be that the quantum system was somehow attuned to the observer's consciousness, allowing it to change in real time based on the observer's state? The more the team investigated, the more they realized that the observer pattern was not just a technical anomaly. It was a profound mystery that touched on the deepest questions of existence. Was the pattern a signal from the early universe, a glimpse into the quantum structure of reality itself? Or was it something else entirely? Something that could help us understand the nature of consciousness and the role it plays in shaping the world around us. One theory that gained traction was the idea that the observer pattern represented a universal symbol, one that transcends the boundaries of time and space. This idea suggested that certain patterns might be fundamental to reality itself, present across all scales, from the quantum to the cosmic. The similarities between the observer pattern and ancient symbols found in human history, such as the Egyptian hieroglyphs representing watchers, hinted at the possibility that these patterns are embedded in the very structure of the universe. Could it be that the observer pattern was a reflection of a deeper, universal truth, one that is encoded into the fabric of reality itself? As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the observer pattern was not just a quantum anomaly, but a window into something far more profound. The pattern had already challenged the boundaries of quantum computing, forcing scientists to rethink their understanding of the relationship between consciousness and the quantum world. But as the team delved deeper into the implications of their findings, they realized that the observer pattern might not just represent a breakthrough in science, it might be a glimpse into the very nature of reality itself. What they had uncovered was not just an anomaly in a quantum system, It was a profound mystery that could have far-reaching implications for our understanding of the universe and our place within it. And as they continued to explore the depths of this quantum enigma, they were left with the unsettling realization that they had only just begun to scratch the surface of a truth that might forever change the way we see the world.